Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, everyone. We're going to jump right into the Torah study because we're a little behind schedule. Mitzion.
כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר ים מירושלים, because from love arises true teaching, and prophecy comes from a place of holiness. Baruch Shenatan Torah le'amo, Torah Israel b'kedushato. Baruch Shenatan Torah le'amo, Yisrael b'kedushato. Hay la 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 la. Hay la 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 ya ra 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 ram. Hay ra 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 ram. Hay ra la 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 la. Ya ra 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 la ya la la. And we say the blessings before the study of Torah. Baruch hu et Yahamvorach. Baruch Yudei Vav Hei Amvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Haya Eloteinu Eim Haolamim Asher Bachar Banu Im Kol Ha'amim Venatan Lanu Et Toratah. Brucha At Shechina Notenet HaTorah.
Amen. Good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for being here. Lots of weather happening around the world. So thanks for showing up in the midst of all that and in the midst of everything else that's happening. It's lovely to be together. So this week we read Parshat Korach. Korach is an interesting character who tries to stand up or does stand up to Moses and Aaron and challenges their authority. And I'm just going to open up with some questions for us to think about as we're hearing the reading, and then I'll do what we do, which is we'll read it in English, and I'll jump in with some reflections and questions, and we'll go through it that way, and we'll have a breakout room, and you know the routine. So I was thinking about this parsha in lots of different ways, and some of the questions that came to me is, so Korach really gets a bad rap from the rabbis about what he's doing, and in this historical moment in which we're living in, there's lots of people who are challenging power and speaking truth to power, and getting a bad rap for that, and getting challenged and pushed back, and so I'm looking at this parsha as a way to ask ourselves, what does it mean to speak truth? Is Korach actually speaking truth, or is he speaking partial truths, or is his ego getting the best of him? And how can we discern the difference between what the rabbis call machloket l'shem shemayim, an argument for the sake of heaven, for something greater than oneself? How can we discern when we're speaking truth or challenging someone for that intention versus when our ego's really what's leading and guiding? So how do we explore that? And I'm going to add here that the Torah, this wonderful teaching that the world stands on three principles: truth, justice, and peace. And so here we are in this parsha and in this time of history where we're seeking to unpack truth, to find a way to justice, and to build peace. And so this parsha for me is one way of exploring those concepts, and engaging with those values and seeing, how do we build justice and peace if we don't engage with truth? But how do we tell truth and make sure that we're speaking truthfully and not that our egos are getting the better of us, I guess. So we're going to hear this parsha. I will jump in, as I've said, and kind of highlight questions and reflections about when I'm questioning whether, or when the rabbis might be questioning, or when you might be questioning, is it truth or is it ego happening here? And what do we do about that? So let's go to the Torah. Thank you, Austin. All right. Is somebody willing to read in English? Go ahead.
I can. Okay. Oh. Now Korah, son of Ishar, son of Kohat, son of Levi, betook himself, along with Dathan and Abram, son of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth, descendants of Reuben, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute.
Okay, I'm going to jump in because you're sitting right here. It's easier. We're unmuted, right? Yeah. Okay. So, Yakamu, it says rise up. So we always know, right? Translations have a way of embedding within them perspectives and viewpoints, but Kamu is like established or stood up. It doesn't, rise up has an intentional rising up against, right? Because he said against. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It could mean that. It says Kumu lifnei, before, stood up before Moses. So it's just something to reflect upon. Already there's a translation, this is a common translation, that's giving the perspective that he stood up with this intention, some sort of intention. So I just want to point that out. Okay, go ahead.
They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and Yudhevave." Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh, Yudhevave is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above Yudhevave's congregation?
Okay, I'm going to jump in again because it's interesting, the translations. Rav Lachem, it is too much for you. It doesn't necessarily mean you've gone too far. In another translation I was reading yesterday, it says it's too much for you. This is you're doing so much. You've taken on a lot, Moses, and we've seen you getting burned out. It's too much for you. Because all of us are holy. Okay.
When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Then he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, "Come morning, Yudhevave will make known who is God's and who is holy by granting direct access. The one whom God has chosen will be granted direct access. Do this, you, Korah, and all your band, take fire pans, and tomorrow put fire in them and light incense on them before Yudhevave. Then the candidate whom Yudhevave chooses, he shall be the holy one. You have gone too far, sons of Levi."
Okay, so I'm gonna pause here and back us up a little bit to just remember I said is Korach, is this Korach's ego, or is he actually trying to speak to power, or maybe both, right? Like we can all do both. We can try to speak to power and get caught up in our ego. So Korach challenges Moses and Aaron in this very public setting, right? So that's one thing for us to think about when we're wanting to speak truth. What is the context in which we do it? Do we want to do it in private or in public? And why? I mean, certain times one might be more appropriate than the other. Maimonides teaches that when you're rebuking someone, you should do it in private. But then at some point you get to do it in public if they don't listen. And in earlier in the Torah, Yitro, if you might remember, actually stood up to Moses and said, "This is too much for you." It's basically he's saying the same thing. It was too much for Moses to sit and hear everyone's complaints and mete out justice for everyone. And so Yitro tells Moses how to create a more just system. And he tells him to appoint all these leaders who are going to hear people's complaints. And then Moses will only hear some really key complaints where they can't be decided in any other way. And so already we've heard that Moses actually maybe is a little full of himself even. He thinks he's the only one who can lead these people. And Korach is saying, yeah, it's too much for you. But Korach did it in public and Yitro did it in private. And the other thing that Korach does here is Korach basically accuses Moses and Aaron of being kind of haughty, being full of themselves, right? Because he says, "Why do you exalt yourself over the congregation?" And so it made me think about, are there other ways that Korach could have expressed himself? How might Korach have expressed his concerns in ways that might have been more compassionate, more reflective, Does anyone have any ideas about a different way Korach could have articulated what he was trying to say here? Right? Because what he's trying to say is, this is too much for you. We're all holy. Yeah, Sharon, I saw your hand. You're muted, my dear.
Well, just the thought that he comes with 250 well-honored people. He's already spread the word. And is it the word of everybody's feeling, or is he inspiring a certain kind of public opinion before he faces Moses? So he's not really speaking truth to power himself. He's getting a kind of guard behind him. And we do know that there are rules against gossip, but how much is this gossip, or is it really the feeling that he is reading the room by?
Mm-hmm. Right, beautiful. So is he rallying the troops, or are the troops already rallied and he's speaking on their behalf? Right, beautiful. Neil.
It seems that we have to take the social context into account. Following the incident of the golden calf, Moses and Aaron recognized that a recently liberated, traumatized people need structure and direction, and tried to contain a lot of this. However, in some of the worst interpretations of this are, and if you break the Sabbath, you will be excommunicated, and an incredible sense of authoritarianism and power over, rather than the true meaning of educate, which is to draw forth from what's in the individual. One could interpret this as a sense of, you've gone too far in creating an external structure, and the basic mystical principle is when God created the universe, Godhead withdrew, so there would be space for human agency and expression. In a funny kind of way, this is sort of like the struggle that occurred in the left in the late 18th, early century, early 1900s, where party discipline of the communists versus the ground up organicness of the anarchists, where both had a strong commitment for human freedom and social justice, but had very different notions of the structure and the principles that will bring this about.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you, Neil. Beautiful. Andre.
I can't imagine that they wouldn't have anticipated that Moses was not going to like this. So I think they must have been really convinced that this was important, and they were willing to risk Moses's anger to bring whatever it is they felt they had to bring to him.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I was wondering, is there any other hands? Okay. I was wondering, what if Korach had said something like, even if he had said it in front of other people, Moses, I have concerns about the way you're structuring the power dynamic here. And, you came from Egypt, which was a society in which there was rigid hierarchy. And we are an enslaved people, and we want to create a new way of being together in society. And I have concerns both about the impact of this on you personally, but also in the ways in which we're not really uplifting everyone in society and seeing their strengths and their humanity. So I'm concerned about that, Moses. Can we talk about it? Now, we have read in the Torah already that different tribes, if you remember, this was just a few weeks ago, have different roles to play to hold the community together. And so Moses could have responded and said, well, and Moses does here respond, we'll see it in a minute, you sons of Levites have gone too far. You Levites, you have a special role to play. You already have your special role. You've gone too far. Why do you need so much more? So Moses is kind of responding in kind back to Korach, saying, you're getting haughty and full of yourself too. You Levites have a very special role to play with the tabernacle and the holy space, and what makes you think that you deserve more? So there's this like little bit of a battle of wills going on here, or a battle of egos that's happening the way I see it.
They both think the other is doing too much.
Right.
Yeah.
They both think they're too full of themselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so Moses then rebukes Korach because of that, right? And so that's just, I wonder, so was Korach really speaking truth? Was it partial truth? Andre, I really like your point. Maybe he had something really important to say. That's why he risked doing it in this particular way. I'm also reflecting on the fact that in the concept of surplus powerlessness, Korach, so surplus powerlessness is the idea that those of us with less power in social movements or in other circumstances will push up against or challenge those with closest to us in the power dynamic structure, because we don't think we have the power or capacity to actually challenge the actual oppression that's happening, the higher up in the hierarchical structure of power dynamics. And so in this instance, Korach is challenging Moses, when really what Korach is struggling with perhaps is, now in the last parsha, the spies went into the land and they didn't come back with a good report. And then if you remember, God said, all of you who have survived this are going to wander in the desert for the next 40 years, and none of you are going to see the promised land. So Korach is part of that. And maybe Korach was one of the people who actually wanted to go with Joshua and Caleb into the promised land and believed their stories. And now he's like, I can't get to the promised land. So maybe Korach is actually really, really distraught. And maybe he's pushing up against Moses because he can't, who else is he going to push up against? He can't push up against God, right? He can't, I mean, really what I see this is Korach saying, oh my God, we can't get into the promised land, and wanting to have a temper tantrum. This is awful. Look what's happened to us. We really screwed up. And I think about that today. How much do we actually just want to scream and shout?
But
We've really made a mess of this situation. It's really horrific. And who are we challenging? And who are we speaking to when we're saying this? And how do we articulate it in ways that brings in our vulnerability as well as our truth telling? And so I'm gonna continue here for a moment, if you'll indulge me. So some of you may have been here last Sunday when we spoke with Ashira Darwish from Where the Olive Trees Weep, and it was very powerful, a lot of truth telling, and it was very hard to hear. And not all of it, I'm sure all of us had different reactions to it, and some of us agreed with everything, some of us agreed with some of us were challenged in many different ways. I found myself challenged at times, both challenged by the depth of the truth that she was speaking, that is really important for us to hear, and also by the impact of the trauma that she's experienced on her vision of what's possible. And I was thinking about this in the same way, which is that how can all of us who are traumatized, any of us who are traumatized, both speak truth and recognize who is it that we need to challenge, and how do we challenge those systems and structures. And I'm not saying what she did was, her vision is wrong, and I'm seeing her, remember I said there's these 3 pillars of truth, justice, and peace. And maybe Ashira's role, maybe the role of some of us, is to be truth tellers right now. And that's what she's doing. She's speaking some really painful, difficult truths. And maybe that's what Korach is doing, trying to speak some really powerful truths. And maybe there's other people who are peacemakers and other people who are seeking and trying to build justice. And how do those balance out? Do we have one more than the other at times? Can we have justice and peace if we haven't dug into the truth and really understand the historical truth and the modern truth, the present day truth? Can we really get systems of justice without truth? And can we really get to peace without justice? So those are kind of some of the things that I've been reflecting on in this parsha. How do we do this? And as somebody as for myself, as I've been standing and speaking at different events and speaking some truths that make people uncomfortable, I've been really reflecting on, how do I hold all three? And do we have different roles to play at different times? Maybe Korach was a truth teller. Maybe not. I'm not clear about that. My jury's out on that. But maybe he was telling some truth. But maybe, and Aaron is known as a peacemaker. It's told in the Torah, and the rabbis say that Aaron was the voice of peace. But when I think about Aaron's voice of peace in the golden calf, his way of being the peacemaker was to appease people. Sometimes peacemakers appease people, and they don't really deal with the truth, or they don't really deal with justice. So it really makes me think about this incredible teaching that we need justice. We need truth, justice, and peace to hold the world together. And there's this really beautiful saying in the Psalms: Chesed ve'emet nifgashu, tzedek ve'shalom nakashu. Loving kindness and truth meet, justice and peace kiss. So we have to have loving kindness and truth, and then when that happens, justice and peace will kiss. Such an exquisite vision to me. So let's go back. If there's anyone, I'm going to open it up for some reflections, and then we'll keep reading.
Yeah, I just had one thing. It seems like Korach is coming, his primary argument to Moses is Rav Lachem, it's either too much for you or you have too much of. And he says it's this holiness thing. It's the holiness question that is the primary question, which may be equivalent to power. But it's also this issue of faith versus trust in the process. You're continually telling us, Moses, to believe, and that we're going, to believe and to have faith, and not to question. But we are tired of this. We are tired of just having faith alone and not actually seeing results. We had results when we were back in Egypt. We had fish to eat and all that. But it's a question of faith versus trust. In the evolution of a process whose end you may not see, and I think that was the primary question also of Korach, was questioning this holiness that is wrapped around Moses and Aaron as messengers of this God who in whom there has to be faith. And they are regular people who are just, starving or having a very difficult time. So I think it's a question also of faith versus trusting in the process that you're in the midst of, that it will end well. And that's really difficult.
Right. And actually, it's not going to, they've basically been told it's not going to end well because they're not going to get to the promised land.
Right. And
so there's this desperation and grief and trauma that they're experiencing. And then also, Korach says, we are all holy. It's a given for Korach that we are holy. But what the Torah actually teaches is you shall be holy, meaning you can be holy. And then it gives us all these mitzvot for how to become holy. And so that's part of what the rabbis explore, is Korach corrupting, if you will, the teaching of holiness to just say everyone's holy. We're all created in the image of the divine, but it doesn't mean we're all holy. Right. Being holy requires taking actions that make one holy. Or in the case of, I would say in the case of Israelites, it also means creating a society that is holy. Like, that's one of the beautiful things about our tradition, I think, is it's not just about, are you acting as an individual holy, but have we created a holy society? And then we're told all sorts of ways to do that, right? Love the stranger, care for the other, take care of the most vulnerable amongst you, build a just society, take good care of the land. Don't cut down trees when you enter another people's land. Feed the hungry. All of these things that then can make us holy. And so the rabbis are saying Moses and Aaron actually are holy. Now, we could have a long discussion about the ways in which they've acted unholy in this journey, but all of us, God willing, all of us have times when we act holy. And I'm certain, I know for myself, at least I have times when I don't act so holy. But we're all on a journey, hopefully, of striving toward greater holiness. And one of the questions that the rabbis explore and critique Korach for is asserting holiness rather than saying we're striving for holiness. So that's another element of it. So Brent, thank you, Ami, for bringing that element in.
Yes, thank you for this interesting discussion. Came to my mind maybe a minor footnote that the Torah teaches us that Moshe was privileged to grow up in the Pharaoh's household, in the royal household. The Torah tells us that. And I'm wondering, did his fellow Israelites know that? And if that was known or partly known, that might be a cause of resentment also, it would seem, because such a different background from what we assume would be with the average Israeli.
That's a
So
really...
is that just something, does the Torah just include that for our benefit, us as ancestors, not ancestors, the opposite, descendants of the Hebrew slaves, or was that known in the community at that time, and that seemed to me could be problematic if it wasn't handled well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brent. That's a really interesting point. I'm going to assume that the people knew Moses came from Pharaoh's household. So maybe there's some skepticism. We know they have lots of skepticism of Moses. Anytime something goes wrong and they're hungry, there's not water, they rebel. Which, if I was wandering in the desert, I would rebel too. I can understand that. And the Torah actually teaches that we're a rebellious people. So they fight back. But it's interesting point that you're raising, Brent, which is some of that because they don't feel like Moses is part of them, that he's separate from them, which is really interesting because at the beginning of this parsha it says that Korach separated himself from. So there's this separation that happens, which is part of also what the rabbis grapple with and struggle with. Like he's separating himself out, like Sharon said, and he has this whole group of people that is separate from. And this is at a time when there's an effort in the Torah by the writers and by the Torah story, if you will, to create a people, right? To bring people together, and yet there's constant separation. Now, how often do we experience that in movements? Right? We're trying to build a unified movement of people with diverse interests and diverse identities and even diverse ideas of how we build a movement and how we change this world, and yet we all want to get to the same place. And often when our efforts are not as successful as we like, or we get stuck because of the backlash and pushback, there become these internal pushbacks, these internal struggles, people fighting amongst each other, separating themselves out. I'm going to get my band of people to come and challenge the people that are seen to be ruling or in power here and bring our voice. And now we're going to do that. And it diffuses the power of the movement. And so maybe part of the critique here is Korach, by doing this, is actually diffusing the power of the people to create the best circumstances they could create in a really crummy situation. Just some thoughts. Yeah, Sharon.
Just one thought. I asked myself, compared to today, I wish there were some divine intervention to help us see what the holy answer is, and translating that into what's right for the people. what's right for the people, all of them at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of Pharaoh, who may have had some thoughts about people, but eventually thinks only of himself. And so the people fall away from the true dictator whose ego blinds him to good leadership. I'm thinking that God's way of handling this, even in the parasha, is not so helpful. That this, I think, would be, I forget if this gets raised in the left hand of God, but this is maybe the worst way God could resolve this situation, because out of fear, I think people don't bring their best selves to resolve their lack of faith or their optimism. And Moses clearly is himself asking for help to deal with this, is quite frustrated by knowing which way to go.
Right.
But yeah, so all around, this is a problematic
Right.
situation.
Right. So just like Korach could have approached Moses with a little bit more vulnerability and compassion, likewise, Moses could have responded with more vulnerability and compassion. He could have responded in a way that said, I'm hearing how distraught you are. We're in a really difficult situation, and I too am really distraught about not getting to the promised land and all of us not getting there together. And maybe this is a really important place for us as a Jewish people to think about what would have happened if in the Torah, what happened in this moment, it could have happened in many moments, but here we are in this part of the Torah. Moses had said, it's time to grieve. We're going to sit down in a circle and we're just going to cry and grieve and scream and shout about the situation we're in, while holding on to the fact that we're no longer slaves, which is a good thing, which they lose sight of at times. And then maybe through that mourning and grief, they could have then worked together. Okay, Korach, and all of you, let's all sit together in listening circles and think about how we're going to move forward. And what can we do to maybe get to the promised land right now? Because we're still not in this promised land. Right? We're still wandering in the desert. So how can we work together? I'm talking about both in the Torah and in our lives, right? How can we work together with what we've got right here in front of us right now to make this existence as holy of an existence as we possibly can? And what would have happened then, and what would happen now if we took time to truly grieve the tragedies of our lives, of our peoples, of other peoples, of the world that we've co-created and that we live in, and that sometimes we benefit from and sometimes we don't benefit from. But yeah, I'm wondering what would happen. What would it look like? The whole Torah from this point forward would be so different. We could write a whole new Torah. The Torah of grief, the Torah of truth-telling, grief, justice and peace, and nonviolence. We could write a whole different Torah, because then something different would happen here. So thanks for bringing that in, Sharon. That's beautiful.
Rabbi, may I thank you? May I thank you? Wow. I'm on the East Coast. I do my Torah study, at 9 a.m. over here. And when I can, when the day allows me, I jump in here. I'm always so grateful when I can, because this was a missing element for me, because I feel we'd be too harsh on Korach and the 250. I mean, if you look at just what you're saying, the trauma of you're free from slavery, but now you're not getting in. You're not getting in, right? You're not getting in, right? And so for us to expect Korach to say, "Oh, okay, I use I statements. I feel disappointed." You know what I mean? It's right. They are not there, but the other side, Moses' anger. I was forgetting this morning. Moses is in trauma too, right? And and perhaps I guess we can say God was in trauma, because I was joking in study this morning how masculine this was when Moses presented the idea to God. He said, "That's my boy. I like your thinking, right? You know." And went along with that. But yeah, but the idea, right, that we weren't there then. Often I look at the wisdom of Torah, of how it captures human nature today. When I first started Torah study, my rabbi used to slow me down. He said, "You can't judge people with the lens of today." But now I'm flipping it. I'm saying, "Wow, look how little we've evolved." And whenever this was written, we're still dealing with this very same issue. But I believe what you're saying. I'm taking up space, I know, but grief then wasn't there. That's the missing element. Grief is what's there now. So I'll thank you, Rabbi Kat, and say hello to my friend Felicity, who's in my Torah study in New Jersey this morning, and she's here with me now.
Great.
All right.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you. Andre, I think your hand's up. Yes, it is.
Rabbi, do you think this trauma was necessary? Was it necessary for the story? Was it necessary for the writers of the Torah? What I'm just wondering what purpose this served, and then you bring up an interesting point. What if it had been written a different way? But I'm wondering that within the narrative of this reading, do you think this was a necessary trauma, or
which trauma? Which trauma are you speaking about here? When you say necessary trauma, I'm wondering which trauma.
Yeah, the conflict and what the conflict is over.
So in the previous parsha, the end of the previous parsha, there's it's about the tzitzit, and you're supposed to wear these tzitzit, and they're supposed to remind you to be holy, and everyone wears them, and everyone gets a blue thread in the tzitzit. That's the teaching, right? We talked about that when we did the prayers. And what's interesting about the tzitzit is it's supposed to be a blue thread of wool, but the tzitzit are linen. But we're told not to mix linen and wool, and the only people that ever get to mix linen and wool and wear it are the priests. So Korach, so there's this argument that the rabbis talk about, like, but wait a minute, everyone actually gets to mix these two together, and so everyone has the capacity to be that priestly, if you will, to be that holy and that powerful. So Korach engages in this. There's a midrash that Korach engages in this fight or this debate with Moses, to say, but basically to make the argument that everyone's holy. So, I'm saying that to say that's part of why the rabbis say this comes here in this part of the Torah, is because there's this teaching that everyone's wearing this special talit or tzitzit that has this special wool string. So is it necessary? I mean, is this trauma necessary? I think it's just, I don't know that there's an answer to that question, right? I think obviously Korach, something's happening with Korach. He's very upset and he wants to be seen. And Moses is saying, but you have all this power. You already are a Levite. You already have so much power. And as Sharon's saying, is Korach speaking on behalf of the Levites, or is he speaking on behalf of the average people who don't have that much power? And it might have behooved Moses to say, remember, every tribe has a different role to play. Everyone's unique and special. Everyone brought something to the tabernacle, and whatever you brought was critical to the building of this holy sacred space. And everything we bring to community is critical to make our community work. So, I don't know if that answers your question, Andre, but that's my best effort for now. Thank you. Okay, so let's keep reading because there's a lot. I jumped in with a lot early on because it was just so rich. But we will hear what God and Moses do to these people, because it's pretty, as Sharon says, it's pretty over the top. So do you want to keep reading?
Yeah, happy to.
Okay, thanks.
Moses said further to Korah, "Hear me, sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has set you apart from the community of Israel and given you direct access to perform the duties of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's tabernacle and to minister to the community and serve them? Now that God has advanced you and all your fellow Levites with you, do you seek the priesthood too? Truly, it is against Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh that you and all your company have banded together. For who is Aaron that you should rail against him?" Moses sent for Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, but they said, "We will not come. Is it not enough that you brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, that you would also lord it over us? Even if you had brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey and given us possession of fields and vineyards, should you not gouge out the eyes of those involved? We will not come." Moses was much aggrieved, and he said to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, "Pay no regard to their oblation. I have not taken the ass of any one of them, nor have I wronged any one of them." And Moses said to Korah, "Tomorrow you and all your company shall appear before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and you and they and Aaron. Each of you take your fire pan and lay incense on it, and each of you bring that fire pan before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, 250 fire pans. You and Aaron also bring your fire pans." They each took their fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and took a place at the entrance of the tent of meeting, as did Moses and Aaron. Korah gathered the whole community against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then the presence of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh appeared to the whole community. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Stand back from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant." But they fell to their faces and said, "O God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one member sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community?" Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the community and say, withdraw from about the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, the elders of Israel following him. He addressed the community, saying, "Move away from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be wiped out for all their sins." So they withdrew from about the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Now Dathan and Abiram had come out, and they stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives and their adult children and their little ones. And Moses said, "By this you shall know that it was Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh who sent me to do all these things, that they are not of my own devising. If these people's death is that of all humankind, if their lot is humankind's common fate, it was not Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh who sent me. But if Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh brings about something unheard of, so that the ground opens up its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, you shall know that those involved have spurned Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh." Scarcely had he finished speaking all these words when the ground under them burst asunder, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, all Korah's people and all their possessions. They went down alive into Sheol with all that belonged to them. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the midst of the congregation. All Israel around them fled at their shrieks, for they said, "The earth might swallow us." And a fire went forth from Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and consumed the 250 contestants offering the incense. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Order Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, to remove the fire pans, for they have become sacred, from among the charred remains, and scatter the coals abroad. Remove the fire pans of those who have sinned at the cost of their lives, and let them be made into hammered sheets as plating for the altar. For once they have been used for offering to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, they have become sacred, and let them serve as a warning to the people of Israel." Eleazar the priest took the copper fire pans which had been used for offering by those who had died in the fire, and they were hammered into plating for the altar, as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had ordered him through Moses. It was to be a reminder to the Israelites, so that no outsider, one not of Aaron's offspring, should presume to offer incense before Yudhevave and suffer the fate of Korah and his band. Next day, the whole Israelite community railed against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You two have brought death upon Yudhevave's people." But as the community gathered against them, Moses and Aaron turned towards the tent of meeting. The cloud had covered it, and the presence of Yudhevave had appeared. When Moses and Aaron reached the tent of meeting, Yudhevave spoke to Moses, saying, "Remove yourself from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant." They fell on their faces. Then Moses said to Aaron, "Take the fire pan and put it on it fire from the altar. Add incense and take it quickly to the community and make expiation for them. For wrath has gone forth from Yudhevave, the plague has begun." Aaron took it, as Moses had ordered, and ran to the midst of the congregation, where the plague had begun amongst the people. He put on the incense and made expiation for the people. He stood between the dead and the living until the plague was checked. Those who died of the plague came to 14,700, aside from those who died on account of Korah. Aaron then returned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of meeting, since the plague was checked. Yudhevave spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and take from them, from the chieftains of their ancestral home, one staff of each chieftain of an ancestral house, 12 staffs in all. Inscribe each one's name on his staff, there being one staff for each head of an ancestral house. Also inscribe Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. Deposit them in the tent of meeting before the pact, where I met you. The staff of the candidate whom I choose shall sprout, and I will rid myself of the incessant mutterings of the Israelites against you." Moses spoke thus to the Israelites. Their chieftains gave him a staff for each chieftain of an ancestral house, 12 staffs in all. Among these staffs was that of Aaron. Moses deposited the staffs before Yudhevave in the tent of the pact. The next day Moses entered the tent of the pact, and there the staff of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted. It had brought forth sprouts, produced blossoms, and borne almonds. Moses then brought out all the staffs before Yudhevave to all the Israelites. Each identified and recovered his staff. Yudhevave said to Moses, "Put Aaron's staff back before the pact, to be kept as a lesson to rebels, so that their mutterings against me may cease, lest they die."
Poor Moses, he's so tired of this. He's just like, "Can you just stop already? I get some slack here. I'm doing the best I can."
Yeah, seriously.
Sorry.
This Moses did, just as Yudhevave had commanded him, so he did. But the Israelites said to Moses, "Lo, we perish, we are lost, all of us lost. Everyone who so much as ventures near Yudhevave's tabernacle must die. Alas, we are doomed to perish."
Do you want to keep going? You want me to see if someone else wants?
I can keep going.
Okay. You're good.
Yudhevave said to Aaron, "You and your sons and the ancestral house under your charge shall bear any guilt connected with the sanctuary. You and your sons alone shall bear any guilt connected with your priesthood. You shall also associate yourself with your kinsmen, the tribe of Levi, your ancestral tribe, to be attached to you and to minister to you, while you and your sons under your charge are before the tent of the pact. They shall discharge their duties to you and to the tent as a whole, but they must not have any contact with the furnishings of the shrine or with the altar, lest both they and you die. They shall be attached to you and discharge the duties of the tent of meeting, all the service of the tent, but no outsider shall intrude upon you, as you discharge your duties connected with the shrine and the altar, that the wrath may not again strike the Israelites. I hereby take your fellow Levites from among the Israelites. They are assigned to you in dedication to Yudhevave to do the work of the tent of meeting, while you and your sons shall be careful to perform your priestly duties in everything pertaining to the altar and to what is behind the curtain. I make your priesthood a service of dedication. Any outsider who encroaches shall be put to death." Yudhevave spoke further to Aaron, "I hereby give you charge of my gifts, all the sacred donations of the Israelites. I grant them to you and to your sons as a perquisite, a due for all time. This shall be yours from the most holy sacrifices, the offering by fire, every such offering that they render to me as most holy sacrifices, namely every meal offering, sin offering, and guilt offering of theirs, shall belong to you and your sons. You shall partake of them as the most sacred donations. Only males may eat them. You shall treat them as consecrated. This too shall be yours, the gift offerings of their contributions, all the elevation offerings of the Israelites I give to you and your wives, to your sons and to the daughters that are with you, as a due for all time. Everyone of your household who is pure may eat it. All the best of the new oil, wine, and grain, the choice parts that they present to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, I give to you. The first fruits of everything in their land that they may bring to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh shall be yours. Everyone of your household who is pure may eat them. Everything that has been prescribed in Israel shall be yours. The first male issue of the womb of every being, human or beast, that is offered to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh shall be yours. But you shall have the male firstborn of humans beings redeemed, and you shall also have the first sling of impure animals redeemed. Take as their redemption price for the age of 1 month up, the money equivalent of 5 shekels by the sanctuary weight, which is 20 gerahs. But the firstlings of cattle, sheep, or goats may not be redeemed. They are consecrated. You shall dash their blood against the altar and turn their fat into smoke as an offering by fire for a pleasing odor to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. But their meat shall be yours. It shall be yours like the breast of elevation offerings and like the right thigh. All the sacred gifts that the Israelites set aside for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh I give to you, to your sons, and to the daughters that are with you, as a due for all time. It shall be an everlasting covenant of salt before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for you and your offsprings as well. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Aaron, you shall, however, have no territorial share amongst them or own any portion in their midst. I am your portion, and you share among the Israelites. And to the Levites I hereby give all the tithes in Israel as their share in return for the services that they perform, the services of the tent of meeting. Henceforth Israelites shall not trespass on the tent of meeting, and thus incur guilt and die. Only Levites shall perform the services of the tent of meeting. Others would incur guilt. It is the law for all time throughout the ages. But they shall have no territorial share among the Israelites. For it is the tithe set aside by the Israelites as a gift to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh that I give to the Levites as their share. Therefore I have said concerning them, they shall have no territorial share among the Israelites. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Levites and say to them, when you receive from the Israelites their tithe, which I have assigned to you as your share, you shall set aside from them 1/10 of the tithe as a gift to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. This shall be accounted to you as your gift, as with the new grain from the threshing floor or the flow from the vat. So shall you, on your part, set aside a gift for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh from all the tithes that you receive from the Israelites, and from them you shall bring the gift to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to Aaron the priest. You shall set aside all gifts due to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh from everything that is donated to you, from each thing its best portion, the part thereof that shall be consecrated, that is to be consecrated. Say to them further, when you have removed the best part from it, you Levites may consider it the same as the yield of threshing floor or vat. You and your households may eat it anywhere, for it is your recompense for your service in the tent of meeting. You will incur no guilt through it once you have removed the best part from it, but you must not, no worries, but you must not profane the sacred donations of the Israelites, lest you die.
Thank you. Whew. Right, so now we have the wrath of the divine, right? Because really the divine is seeing this as a challenge to divine authority, not just to the human of Moses and Aaron, right? So God freaks out and opens the earth and swallows people and then sends a plague on top of it. interesting, Moses begs for their savior, right? Like Moses pleads and begs that they not be devoured and killed. So it's just like this emotional, traumatic roller coaster. I feel like just reading God's rage, Moses's rage, Korach's rage, and I want to turn it on its head and take it as a lesson. Maybe that's what I like to do with these things. I take it as a lesson to us to, when we feel enraged, righteous anger, righteous rage, like rage at actual injustice in the world that is all over the place right now. How do we articulate that rage in ways that are effective? And I want to say I'm not convinced that doing it like the way I suggested Korach do it or Moses respond is any more successful necessarily. I don't know that we know the answer to that, but I think it's important that we try lots of different strategies to tell truth to power, speak truth to power, and to articulate our rage. And we try lots of different avenues and ways to do that, so that we can, because when we're feeling that rage, right, what we want to do is be heard. We want to be effective. We don't just want to spew rage for the sake of spewing rage. That's really grief that needs to be articulated. But when we want to actually challenge power, we want to be effective in those efforts. So this parsha for me is a challenge for us of how can we learn to do that. And I guess we're told Korach did not do that very successfully. But I like Andre's comment and Mike's response. Well, so the punishment for trying to speak truth to power, to challenge power imbalance, is death. That's not the world we want to live in either. So it's a challenging parsha. So one of the things I'm going to share is in this parsha, in this last chapter that we read, it says, Avodat matana eten et kehugnatchem, which is, it's a confusing, there's lots of discussion about how do you interpret this. Avodat is like service. In service of giving, I'm giving you service. So this is to the priests. So the priests are given a special role in society to serve. And there's this discussion that the rabbis have about what is the meaning of this. And there's this beautiful exploration, and when I like to think about it too, which is avodat matana, in service of giving. Matana is giving, is gifts. So in service of giving, that's what priests are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be giving. It's like an honor. You get to be a giver in society. And when you're a giver like that, then you get gifts. You get to receive. And Abraham Joshua Heschel says there's two ways that we can be in the world. We can be like the expediency. We can be in this world of expediency. And in that world, we have an eye on how can we get what we want? How can we accumulate and dominate, right? And then we also can live in, as I mentioned earlier, this world of wonder and awe. And then in that world, the question is, how do we serve? And how do we deepen our appreciation in order to respond? And this is that's the world of giving and receiving. Not giving and getting, or not giving and taking, but just this general giving and receiving. And every morning, I do morning prayers, and part of my morning prayer is gratitude for the different elements of my body. And I give gratitude to my lungs, which are actually my back, and my whole respiratory system. And I say, I breathe in, take in the air, and I turn to oxygen, and I breathe it out as carbon dioxide, and the trees take it, and then they breathe it in, if you will, and they actually share it, right, with other trees we now know, and then it comes out, and then we breathe it in this beautiful cycle of giving and receiving. And I wonder what the world would be like if we lived in a world where there was giving and receiving, not taking, not expediency, and that this is the tension we all live with, right? Because I think the expedient world, the times we're in expediency, is where we're in our egos, and we're in a fear world. We're in constriction, and there's not enough. And when we're in the giving and receiving, then we're more in a world of abundance, of trust, of, as Ami said, of faith. And when we give, and maybe this is what the priests were, this is kind of the lesson to the priest, but really a lesson to all of us. When we give, then we imitate God's holiness, God's giving. And when we take, we also imitate the sides of God that we see in the Torah that takes, or that constricts, or that kills. And so I was thinking about this. Todd, I'm wondering if you could hold your question until after we do short breakout rooms. Would that be okay? So I was wanting to reflect on this in terms of leadership today. Leaderships of movement, leaderships of countries, leaderships of communities. This balance that we really, I'm going to kind of pull it into this whole parsha, right? This balance, this struggle between our ego self, what our mincha metzar, our constricted self, our constricted consciousness, our moadim katnut, our small mind, and our moadim gadlut, our big mind, or our expanded consciousness. That we all have this, right? All of us go back and forth between this, and we're seeing we're in a difficult place because we have a lot of leaders who are stuck in small consciousness, ego self. So what do we, whether it's in movements or in, leaderships of countries, or whether you're speaking to people and trying to get them to hear you, how do we discern and how do we share from our highest consciousness? And how do we listen to discern if someone else is speaking from our higher consciousness? And how do we respond from higher consciousness even when someone's speaking from lower consciousness? So the thing I want you to explore is, what do you notice both within yourself and in the movements that you're in, or when you're listening to politicians or the radio? How do you discern these different consciousnesses? Consciousnessim? How do you say that in the plural? How do you discern different consciousness? And how do you then engage and respond with that in a way that uplifts, that attempts to bring into the space the highest consciousness we can in the moment, because we really need that. And when we come back, I have a few other thoughts about this parsha, and then we'll hear from Todd and others. Everyone's back. Welcome back. So Todd, I want to see if you still want to share what you thought before. Then we'll open up to others.
Sure. I would just emphasize what jumps out at me is that this group was swallowed up. So what I see is they actually were a mob, and it was about too much. It was about ego, and they were bad guys. So they you get swallowed up, and that's the way I like to look at it. And I also was reflecting on, from what Neil was saying about the process, something, it's just so hard to figure out, maybe even as intractable for us, but the idea of how many leaders and what does a leader mean? How many leaders do you need? What does a leader mean? I like the more democracy, the better, but I struggle with the total anarchy is, it doesn't work unless you have really, really localized groups. Maybe that's the answer, actually, is we haven't tried that, really localizing and keeping groups small, and then you can federate. So if what I'm trying to say is, this parsha gets right at process, which, you had the debate, actually, I think it became an too emotional fight between Marx and Bakunin about whether you need state and leadership or the classical anarchists where everybody's involved. So there's that tension there. I like to think that everybody can have a say and, get away from this leadership model as much as possible. But
you have to make it work. So that's
Thank
what I
you.
wanted to.
Thank you. Yeah, it's trying to find the right way to create a society that works. Other thoughts or reflections from breakout rooms anyone wants to share? Ari.
Yeah, so we talked about, we started with this idea that there's a kind of knowing that we have about expanded consciousness when it happens, but it's hard to put our finger on. And we went from there to this concept of vulnerability, and Sharon went into a conversation about how she used it in her current communal living place to bring people around who said they didn't want to talk about politics. And then we went into this place where we talked about how you have to speak with and not at people to create this expanded consciousness, and that's another component.
Beautiful.
And at some point, we also talked about how I would phrase it, that ideological negotiation has to go on, and you have to find. We didn't really. I'm expanding this now. We didn't really get to this, but if that's happening in a protest movement, then it probably has to work in multiple ways. But kind of, so I would call it a pluri-universe rather than a universe. A pluriverse, I guess. So you have to create a little pluriverse in your movement to move forward. So that's about it. That was added. We didn't really talk about that last idea. But.
That's okay. Great. Thank you. Beautiful. You guys want to share anything?
Sure. Yeah, we talked about. Oh yeah.
Then I can see you better.
We talked.
Thank you.
About. I guess the thing that struck me as most interesting that we discussed was this kind of chain of constricted consciousness or anger that occurred in this story. Korach coming to Moses in a escalated state. Moses kind of responding in a constricted or escalated way, and then God ultimately responding in kind. And what if someone had broke the chain? What if Moses had, kind of like Rabbi Kat was speaking of earlier? What if he said, "Now I hear you. Now is the time for us to grieve as a community." How that would have probably, or potentially, I guess we don't know for sure, but that could have changed God's response to the whole situation. And it's very easy to see the response as horrifying, because it is this collective punishment of this group of people. But it's it kind of makes a certain amount of sense in the story as like the continuation of this chain of anger or constricted consciousness.
Right. What happens if we bring expanded consciousness into spaces where there's a lot of narrow consciousness? And what happens when we bring narrow consciousness into expanded consciousness? It tends to suck out or breathe life into. So it's just something for us to think about, right? Whether in whatever ways we're living in the world, as parents, as partners, as activists, as however it is, like in communities, how do we just to be mindful of what is the energy happening and what is the energy we can contribute to that space. And if we can't contribute expanded consciousness in a moment or two, because certainly there's times when we can't, what do we need to do within ourselves to uplift ourselves to a higher consciousness so that we can bring that into the space? Philip or Catherine?
Hi, thank you. I wanted to sort of reflect a little bit on what I've seen over some decades since I've been an adult in sort of movement groups of one kind or another. I remember being in Berkeley in the 60s and working or being around Michael Lerner at the time when he was organizing and advocating and giving speeches and for one thing or another. And there came a time in this, at least this was in the early 70s, in which leaders were people like Michael and others were trying to step forward, to lead, to gather other people to support them and support the ideas, and they being challenged. And there was this just sort of brought down, and people a little bit like this story that we dealt with today, challenging leadership, and it sort of developed that people recognized that there was a sort of a tendency to drag people down, to drag leaders down, to attack them rather than, the administration or some higher power. And there got to be a big discussion about this, and how leaders shouldn't be this way, and other people saying, well, wait, this is what we need. We need leadership. They can be representative, and then it seemed to evolve over the years, a shift in and it's, I think, reflected in the kinds of meetings and organizations that have sort of evolved over these decades, that there's much more participation. These breakout groups became a thing not so long after that. There was much more sort of collective opportunity for everybody in small groups to meet and talk, and then bring what they thought into the larger groups. And as a trend, at least I've seen it over 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
Now this is standard. And look at our own group here. We do this as a regular thing. Give everybody has a chance to weigh in and speak and to talk, and everybody counts in ways that it really wasn't the case in the maybe early 70s or 60s.
Right.
So I think there's progress.
That's beautiful, Philip.
To
Yeah.
be seen.
Thank you. And on the campuses, it always amazed me when I was hearing stories about how they had different groups that were leaders that would go negotiate with the administrations, and they would have different groups of people, both so no one would get burnt out. Yitro, right? Yitro story in the Torah, and also so more people had capacity and had more ideas to share. And then they would bring it back and everyone would vote. And it was so, hearing these stories were so inspiring. And I think that is an evolution of consciousness, right? That we don't have to hold on to and hoard power. We can share it. And if we share it, it's much more generative. There's way many more ideas. We bring different histories, we bring different knowledge, we bring different information, different perspectives, different places in society that need to be heard. It's really quite inspiring to see that type of changes in how we move forward. So I'm gonna wrap us up here with just a couple other reflections to you to think on, because we're actually late, and we still want to do a blessing, a short blessing, Ami, for the new moon. We won't do the long thing, and I want to say something about the new moon. But it's one of the things that I thought about with Korach, and this could lead to a much bigger discussion. So I'm gonna bookmark it, okay, and we can come back to it another time. Is what if Korach was saying, Moses, you're not so exceptional, and what if this is an argument about Jewish exceptionalism? And what if it's a critique of thinking we're exceptional? And so on one hand, maybe he's challenging exceptionalism, and then there's another way of looking at it, that maybe he's saying we're not, we're not all so exceptional. Each of us have a special role. Each of us have a role to play, and there is no exceptionalism. So it's just an interesting, I'm going to bookmark it there, and we'll come back to an exploration of it. But it sparked for me this question about exceptionalism that is so, such a big thing right now in our world.
Can I just
So-
say one thing?
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap us up because of time, so make it
No,
quick.
it's just very quickly that as I was growing up and we would be saying prayers, a lot of the wonderful psalms that we say and sing are dedicated from Korah
Right.
and his sons. And in a way, the authors of the Psalms took them and it sort of it was only later that I learned about Korach in this story, but I had also always associated him and the Levites with music and sweet song and the legend that they will someday come back in good form.
Right.
You know, so they're not completely vilified in tradition. In fact, just the opposite. They are
Right.
the
They
forces
do
of
get
nature.
uplifted, which is amazing. They
Yeah,
get vilified and uplifted.
yeah, yeah.
They get both. Um, yeah, Heidi, we hadn't heard from you, but you're unmuted. I'm not sure if there was something quick you wanted to add.
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Okay. Um, all right. So we're going to, in a moment, after we close the Torah, we'll do the blessing for the new moon. I just want to say it now before I forget. Chodesh Tammuz. So I was reading about Chodesh Tammuz, and one person, we'll do the closing and stuff, but is that Chodesh Tammuz is the month that's dedicated to fixing. This is so interesting when you think about our conversation. So that's why I wanted to say it. Is dedicated to fixing our fear or our distorted sight. It's the tikkun of sight. So so it just seemed relevant, so relevant for our discussion, like our what is it that we can see? What is it that we struggle seeing? Can we have a tikkun of sight so we can see the truth, hear the truth, and also so we can discern when there's gaslighting or when there's lies and distortions. So this is that month. So I want to invite you during this next Hebrew month of Tammuz to be discerning about sight and about seeing and hearing, because I'm going to use sight more broadly in that context. That is the message for the month of Tammuz. So let's continue in our service. Thank you, Austin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu brucha aya shechina notenet haTorah. Amen.
Amen.